Are you investigating project-based learning? Are you a seasoned PBL teacher or leader? Do you need more PBL resources to help you or your team on their PBL journey? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I have the perfect resource for you. Go to whatispbl.com. When you go to whatispbl.com, you could choose resources by administrator or teacher, and then we'll customize those resources for you. Go to whatispbl.com. Welcome, I'm Ryan Story, and I serve as a leader of Magnify Learning, and I'm also the host of the PBL Simplified podcast. The podcast is in the top 5% of all podcasts, and it's the number one longest running PBL podcast show. Our big, hairy, audacious goal is to have 51% of schools using PBL by 2051, affectionately known as 51 by 51. We see a better world in the future when the majority of students are graduating purposeful instead of passive. When students, teachers, and principals all know their purpose and are working in their areas of genius, we think the world will be a better place. Thank you for tuning in today so that we can help you simplify the PBL process and bring your vision off the page and into your school. Today is the 5th Wednesday of the month, which doesn't happen every time, so we have a bonus interview this week. We have Terry Short, who is a masterful leadership coach who can help choose the right words and help you avoid others while we as leaders are trying to build a positive school culture. The difference between we have to and get to, and how do we help our staff buy into the culture we are creating. In this interview, we dive into Terry's book, The Words We Choose, Your Guide to How and Why Words Matter, to give you very concrete examples of what words you should say as a leader, and again, which you should avoid. You'll want to take notes on this one. Enjoy. Okay, visionary leaders, we have a PBL leadership guest episode today, which means that we're going to bring you somebody from the business world or sports or education, wherever. We try to bring in the best minds and voices, and we've got Terry Short today, and I think you're really going to appreciate the leadership insights that she brings. Let me give Terry's bio real quick before we say hi, but Terry's a human potential developer, which I love. It's such a great title, and has been a coach in some capacity her entire career. She has more than 30 years of leadership experience. She's got an MBA in healthcare management, professional coach certifications, the PCC, and certified patients experience professional. So she's got some acronyms after her name because she's been doing this for a while at a high level. She's also the author of The Words We Choose, Your Guide to How and Why Words Matter, which is one of the things I'm really excited about. Bringing her voice to you, visionary leader. The book was awarded 2020 American Book Fest finalist. She's been interviewed by various mediums such as Fast Company, NPR, and now PBL Simplified. Terry, thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.
Excited to be here, Ryan. It's my honor. So thank you.
Yeah, I love the title of your book, and we're going to get into that. What we ask every guest, whether it's a teacher, principal, CEO, whoever it is what is your why for the work that you do?
Yeah, I think we should keep asking ourselves that. I appreciate you asking me today, but I believe we should ask ourselves that every day, right? That we stay clear about that and we have that clarity in our hearts, not just in our minds, right? Mm-hmm. So mine is, I've been around for a while, and I get even more clear about my purpose the older I get, and that's to have an impact on thousands and thousands of leaders. And so that's my why, and how to go about that is to impact them by way of how they view themselves. So their sense of self, and one sense of self makes all the difference. It's it's the difference between just barely getting by or thriving. And so a sense of self and helping people develop, like the human potential developer, that means helping them elevate their sense of self. And what's that tied to? The words we choose. So it's the words we choose, and we'll get to that for ourselves and for others. And I want to offer a couple of great quotes. So Laura Buchanan says, when we listen, we hear someone into existence.
Oh, okay.
So that's a good sense of self. Yeah. And the very first quote in my book is by a guy named Tom Kenyon, who says, we're creating the world by how we speak to each other. So my why, helping people communicate better and develop their sense of self and the sense of self of someone else. Like the people listening to this podcast today, they're in the business of developing a lot of sense of selves.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we talk about managing leader versus visionary leader. There are some things you do need to manage, like a master schedule for our principals, but you're leading people, right? And I think you've already delivered a ton of value. Like this is exactly what I was thinking when we scheduled this. Is it's way more than leadership tactics, right? It's like, who are we as a leader? You've already mentioned like the heart, right? Beyond maybe skills and the thought processes we have. So let's dive into some of your wording that I don't know if you've got this trademarked, but you should, that you have this term called the internal podcast. So what is the internal podcast and why is it so important?
Well, and I actually say personal podcast. So when
Okay,
I
got it.
see you right now with your headset on, I think about people, we have our headsets on kind of 24/7, right? Think about it that way. And we're listening to this internal narrative or personal podcast. The reality is, just as you have a team, which I love who that team is,
Mm-hmm.
you, it ends up for the internal podcast or the personal podcast, you're the producer, director, narrator, host. You get to decide who comes on and when they come on. My personal podcast was going super strong at about 1:30 this morning. But I need to stop and say, wait, whoa, wait a minute. I'm in charge of that podcast and that guest that it was an external person whose voice was, kind of tuning in or turning up at that time. And I thought, oh, well, wait a minute, this does not serve me now. And I'd rather be sleeping and I'll think about this in the morning. And so thinking about the control one has over that personal podcast and taking that to heart first and foremost, because as a teacher, as an administrator, the goodness that all of the listeners are going to do in the world with others begins with themselves.
So this personal podcast, like this is the thought processes that I have. And sometimes we don't think we have control over that, right? It's just the thought that comes. But I think
Right.
you're saying, hey, we're the editor and producer of that. So
Right.
if this is a brand new idea, like does someone have that they have this personal podcast that they have control over? Where do they start?
Excellent question. So I'm a huge believer in having some mindful moments. I believe you should practice the pause before you speak, before you enter a meeting, before you're pretty much doing anything. And then you should also practice the pause afterwards to assess how well you did or what you would do differently. And so in those moments, that's when I believe there's an opportunity to think more specifically about that personal podcast. So, in other words, I'm about to come on this podcast with you, or I'm about to have a meeting. And so, what is my internal narrative saying? Right. So, maybe it's saying, have you prepared enough? Or what do you know about Ryan? Or what have you? Like, there might be there might actually be some anxiety producing narrative that's going on. And then my job is to pause long enough to say, oh, wait a minute, that's not serving me, that's not useful. Here's what I do know, and here's what I have done. And I replace the trick is the replacement. A lot of people say, I'm not going to listen to that anymore, or that's my father's voice showing up and it's not useful, what have you. The trick is to replace it with something that is, so that the next time that thought that no longer serves comes up, you have the replacement for it. You have like the trigger to go, no, this is what is the truth. This is what I believe.
Yeah. And some of our principals are so busy that like when you say pause, they're like, when in the world would I pause? Is it also like maybe they're not hearing the negative voice? I'm sure. I mean, we all have that somewhere and we need to replace it. But I can also see the principal that has to go from one meeting to a classroom to an emergency. Like, is that pre-pause, like right before I go into the door? Because I could see some principals just jump in and say, well, okay, let's do it. But like even a 10-second pause before I enter that meeting to be mindful.
Okay. I'm going to zero it down to a 3-second pause.
Oh,
Okay.
great. Yeah.
3 seconds. So you find me the principal that doesn't have 3 seconds
Yes, that's right. Get them,
in a
Terry.
meeting. So here are the three things, 3 breaths. So I actually was just live on Instagram this morning and I offered this. Deep breath in for arrival. So this is I'm present. I'm coming. I'm arriving now. I'm going to make eye contact with the people in the room. So I'm about to touch the handle, walking down the hall, whatever it is. And I say, deep breath in. I am present. Exhale. Deep breath in, I will listen. I have the intention to listen in wherever I'm going, right? Exhale. Deep breath in, I have the intention to deposit or absorb the information. And so it's just as simple as that. I mean, I just took several seconds to do it, but I'll do it for you in 3 breaths. Like in, I will listen. I am here. I am here. I am present. Exhale. Deep breath in. I have the intent to listen. Exhale. Deep breath in. I will absorb and deposit this information. Exhale. And then I show up totally present, right?
Yeah, that's so good. And I always love tools. Like I like to have tools that we can grasp, right? So it's like after this podcast, like we're going to record this, and then I'm going to, go be with my team, or in this case today, like I'm going to go be with my family. So it's like, how can I kind of shed my work, persona, if you will, or like the go. For the principal listening, you just got yelled at by a parent, but now you need to meet with your staff, right? So just 1, 2, 3, I'm here, I'm going to listen, I'm going to absorb. So we're going to figure out how to put that in the show notes for our listeners, just in case you're driving. But I really like that tool. Terry, can you give us a story that you can share about the impact of someone managing that personal podcast?
That'd be me. I manage it 24/7.
Yeah, right. So good.
I get better at it as I age, right? Several times where it's made all the difference. So when I got more hip to managing it, so I'm going to go back a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm 18, 19 years old. I work for my father for his company. It's all men in the company, electrical, mechanical engineering. The next thing you know, I'm doing procurement. And I know that when people answered the phone, they think there's a young woman on the other end, and never mind that they didn't know I was 18 or 19, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Anyone other than my father had presented to me that you can't do that. She can't do that. I could overhear it and such. And he would say, of course you can. And then I started saying that, of course I can. Right. Pretty much about anything, Ryan. Right. So then advanced several more years. I'm by myself in New Zealand and I'm traveling around the South Pacific. And I'd get in this harebrained idea that I want to crew on a yacht from New Zealand to Australia. And I start telling people and they're like, well, do you know how to sail? And I'm like, yeah, well, okay, that's kind of a sticking point. I knew enough about sailing and I was going to do some research and learn a little bit more. But then again, here came that voice going, there are other voices. I could allow them in and it would have prevented me from doing that. Instead, I went back to, of course I can, the replacement that I had learned to make early on. And now I use it all the time, right? So, and that's not to say that one should exert overconfidence about something. You want to research and you want to know what you're doing, for sure. But it certainly doesn't serve you to allow others to tell you what you can and can't do.
Yeah, that's such a great filter. Does this thought serve me, or does this idea serve me? And you're giving us permission to just say, this doesn't serve me, so I'm going to replace it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
That's super good. So your book is The Words We Choose, right? So we're choosing these words we're putting into our personal podcast. And I know I did when I was in the classroom, like I would tell students, hey, you have to watch your words, sometimes negative, like, hey, you just literally can't say those things in school, but also like, hey, you're better than that, right? Or you have more opportunity than that. What about like, how do we take that advice as teachers and educators that we've given to students for so long? I know that I've got some principals that are listening. They're like, hey, I'm high functioning. I don't have time for this stuff. I'm going to push back on that. I think you are too. And I'll let you go first.
So I think that it hinges on ask more, tell less, right? Ask more, tell less. So even though the teachers have this, no, we can't do that, or you can't say that, or what have you, that's going to keep happening unless you're able to tie it to the student's intention. And this happens in the workplace too, right? Because it's all transferable. So it's 2 words, intention and values. So if you could get the student to say that they value, or the organization, let's say at our school, we value inclusion, or we value learning. And so help me understand. So either a question, or if you're not going to ask a question, then tell me more or help me understand are the phrases, the intro phrases. Help me understand how this word that you chose ties to our value of inclusion. Or how do you think this word affects our value of inclusion? And so questions that start with what or how, and then those statements, because when we ask questions that say why did you choose that word? I'm implying judgment, right? If I ask what and how, I'm inviting you into exploring and making the connection between that word choice and either your intention. Did you intend to hurt that person? Is that like, you're not going to ask that because that's yes, no, but help me understand your intention in choosing that word. What did you intend to convey to the individual when you said X?
Right. So if I'm a principal listening and I've got a staff member, we're encouraging as PBLers and these principals, they're creating this culture, right, within a school. Then we always say, like, your student culture will never rise above your adult culture. Okay, so adult culture is really important. And one of the ways that we talk about this is why I think we have this great intersection today in this conversation is we talk about like our shared words, right? Start to build our culture. So then, Terry, you're telling us like almost doubling down on that, right? That now we need to choose our words and make sure we're saying those words. So can you just expound on this more for the principal, like the importance of the words that we choose as leaders? We're trying to create a culture of maybe a staff of 30. Like, how important is this, and how do we kind of double down on this?
I'm so happy that you brought this up because in my leadership training, I call it being the ambassador of the culture. And you're spot on when you say it will only, whatever the culture is going to be with the students hinges on what happens with the leadership team or with the teachers, right? And so here's the deal. So I've been coaching this for decades, and it's about being super clear first about the mission, vision, and values of the organization. What is that? Like, who do you serve? How do you serve them? Why do you serve them? So on and so forth. So that, assuming that the organization has that all in place. And then it's about taking the mission, vision, and values, particularly the values, off of the wall or the poster or the, hallway or the restroom door or whatever, and putting them in the hearts first of the leadership team and then the students. How do you do that? You use those words in darn near every bit of communication. In emails, like if you're one of the other, I'm a teacher, you're a teacher, how we communicate with each other, and I send you an email and say, Ryan, in the spirit of collaboration, let's assume that's one of the values, right? In the spirit of collaboration, I'd love to invite you to join the such and such meeting. So I'm overtly and intentionally weaving those values into all communication. The administrator, the principal, does not stand up and speak in front of anybody without weaving some portion of the mission, vision, and values, because that can continuously tying people back to why they're there and what their purpose is, which then in turn informs how they show up, their internal dialogue, and how they speak to others.
So I had a principal that does this well, right? So he's large public high school, 5th largest in his state. They have a handbook. It's all very clear. And he's been doing this about 5 years, very high functioning to enable to make this work. But he says, well, my people have heard me say this before. Like, are they getting bored with it? And he was trying to figure out, like, do I need new words? What would you say to him? Does he need new words, or does he just need to keep going with the words he's been using?
Well, I'd have to do a little diagnosis on what he is using.
Sure. Let's assume that it's high functioning. He's got a good culture. He's been very clear on what the mission and vision is. He could rattle them off, right? And his teachers could rattle them off. But his worry is, are they going to get bored with this because they always hear me give this speech? And should he change? Is there a detriment to changing these words?
Yeah, no, not if they're working. He shouldn't change them. He should ask more questions. So ask questions that tie to the values. So Ryan, if I'm him, Ryan, tell me something that you did today that exemplified our value of such and such. Like, weave it into conversation, ask more questions around it. Would be one thing to do. And then here's the next level that perhaps he hasn't gone here yet. You made me think about it because I had a hospital CEO that I coached, and he did this turnaround that I'm about to tell you, like nobody I've ever seen before. And he's mentioned in the book, actually. We started talking about the difference between have to and get to. And in a hospital, there are a lot of rules and regulations. Those are designed to keep people alive. So it's super important.
Yep.
And so we talk a lot about, now we have to do this. We have this new regulation. We have to this, we have to that. And his culture was really suffering. So we started talking about how to turn that around, mission, vision, and values. And I introduced the concept that perhaps we should start talking about what we get to do. What we get to do as opposed to have to do, because it's not a burden to keep the people alive.
It's right. That's why you're there.
Yeah, it's what we get to do, right? And I in the book, I tell the example of, the parents who say, I have to pick the kids up after school today. Okay. Well, somebody who has a 25 and 26-year-old clearly realizes that you get to do that.
Yeah, that's right.
The amount of time, like super limited, right?
Yep.
And so even thinking about one child hearing the parents say it about the other child, I have to go get, Susie at her soccer practice or whatever. No, actually, I get to do that. I get to do it. It's a privilege. It's not a burden.
Gosh, I love that in so many different ways. The faculty meeting is one way, one of the tools that our principals have to communicate to their staff. And a lot of times you have to go to a faculty meeting, right? Or I have to plan for this faculty meeting instead of I get to talk to my team and inspire them and bring more vision and mission into things. So, wow, I'm just thinking about all the words I used yesterday and like how intentional was I with these, right? But I think there's a tangible tool again of if you're super clear and you really believe in your mission, vision, and values, then you should be using those words often. It's not, please join us at this meeting. It's, I value your collaboration, problem solving. So we really want you to be here at this meeting.
I'll add another one. I like the word invite. We invite you to collaborate and problem solve with us, right? So it implies more of the privilege of doing so, and it also opens the box of gratitude, right? When you start using some of these words in this manner, it makes one feel grateful for the ability to do that, to meet with the team or what have you, and that sort of changes everything. I mean, it changes how you show up and how you feel about your day. I'll tell you another story, Ryan. So I was a coach and consultant in the healthcare world, and I would spend a certain amount of every week in and out of hospitals coaching the leadership team and such. And so, and this goes back to that personal podcast. So maybe I didn't feel like parts of the day went particularly well, or one leader had put me off, or was unable to see me, or this happened or that happened. Well, I trained myself that when I was leaving the facility, and they were out of town, they weren't in my town, so I was going to leave the facility, go to my rental car, and go to the airport or go back to the hotel. I actually trained myself that when I walked out the door, pushed the door open from the hospital, between that door and the handle of my car door, where however far away that was, I would contemplate the value that I brought that day. Right?
Okay.
Push the door open and I'd say, okay, so that personal podcast might already be playing, going, I didn't get to see so-and-so, and that was a missed opportunity, and I've got this sort of negative spiral happening. And then I'd stop myself and say, whoa, wait a minute. What value did I bring today? And I was always able to squeeze out that value. And what more value will I add to it tomorrow, or what will I do differently, or what have you? But I always started with, and I propose everybody starts with, when you're reflecting, the positive. What's the positive? Right. And by the time I touched the car door, I had teased out some value.
Yeah, that's right. And education is pretty tough right now. I think it always has been, but it's pretty tough right now. And it can get negative. So great tool for your staff meeting, or just at the end of the day. Hey, teachers, thank you for being here. Share, one piece of value that you brought today. Or even just, I just feel like all of our principals need to teach. I guess we have to live it first, right? And then we can teach it to our staff. Is that how you'd recommend that? Like as a leader, I suppose we'll never be perfect at this, but I need to start down the path before I bring it to my staff.
Yes, you get to. Yes, you do.
Oh, good. So
You
good. You're
it's a
right.
choice. Yeah, you get to.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and absolutely. I do believe that, I mean, certainly in education, modeling is everything, right?
Yeah.
So start there. And that's why, like in the book, I start with the personal podcast part. I start with that internal dialogue. That makes all the difference. That's what builds the sense of self, which then allows me to help with your sense of self. I do like how SOS, sense of self, help. Sometimes I'm going
Yeah.
to help your sense of self, right? So,
Right. So this is awesome. And we'll put the link to your book in the show notes because every leader needs to grab your book and we get to go down this path with you. But before we give you, I want to give you a chance to kind of tell us where we can connect. I've got one more question. Uh, are there specific words we've kind of touched on it, have to get to? Are there specific words that can really hurt the process of, what a leader's trying to do? Like we're trying to fulfill this vision. In our case, we're trying to reach kids and show them new opportunities. Are there some specific words that you can give us that we really need to avoid?
good. I'm kind of, someday I'm not going to botch this up, but I always botch up the Henry Ford quote. Whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So can't. I mean, a teacher using words like can't or should or must, check those, check yourself on those types of words, because where's that coming from? Right? Is it true that they can't do this? And particularly everybody knows that story or that person, that adult who can say, well, when I was younger, I was told I wasn't good at sports or that I couldn't write well or I can't this. And so they internalize that for decades.
Yeah, that's right.
So think about how powerful that is. Yeah. So I share one of those stories in the book. But anyway, my point is, if you're offering words such as limiting words, such as can't, that you must, or that you should, check yourself on that and think about those replacement words. Because when you say that you must or you should, you're implying that for some other reason other than my internal reason, right? You should do that, is that it's because society says so, or your peers say so, or the administration says so. And that actually can create a we they circumstance,
Okay.
or we must do this because the principal said so. That's not helpful, right? That's not owning it. So any teacher that's using those words routinely should take a few steps backwards and replace them with what you get to do. If instead of should, we can, we will, we have an opportunity to, let us explore, instead of like pushing the should or the must or what have you.
Right. I like the reasoning behind that we're, imposing that and maybe cutting off someone's internal ability or reasoning for doing such a thing, whatever it is.
Right.
Very good. Well, Terry, this was such a fun conversation. Our audience, we'll put in the show notes a link to your book so our audience can dive in more. What are some other ways that we can stay in touch with you?
Well, we have lots of free resources, Ryan. Actually, I pride myself on the give back part, and so lots of free resources on our website, which is Thriving Leader Collaborative and .com. So Thriving Leader, no F, collaborative.com, and there's a resource section. There's podcasts and interviews, and but like yours will be on there. Right? Yeah. And anyway, so then contact me directly, Terre, spelled Terre, at thrivinglc.com. And Instagram, we're on most Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And again, giving back and providing content and little snippets here and there to help inspire people.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll make sure that we get those links in the show notes so that our visionary leaders can come back to those and get them as they need them.
Right.
Terre, thank you so much. What a great conversation. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. The more I can spread the word, the better. And so I thank you for being a conduit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the right audience. Visionary leaders, your words matter. And they cascade down to your staff, which cascade down to your students, which is where we really want to make that impact. And as you grab this book, you're going to get to dive into and use some new tools, which is really exciting so that you can engage your learners, tackle boredom, and transform your classrooms. So go lead inspired. Thank you for listening to this episode of the PBL Simplified podcast. Would you help us achieve our vision of 51 by 2051? One small step you can take to help us out is to leave a review of the PBL Simplified podcast. Scroll down to the bottom of our show page, select a star rating, and leave a review. Your review helps others find this podcast. When you leave a review, the next visionary leader will see your words and join us. Thank you for leading inspired.